Halito, and welcome to Native Choctaw, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our native ancestors' stories and history alive while also sharing with you our native cultures, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And stay tuned for the end of each episode where we'll talk about some great ways to support Native causes and or Native-owned businesses. Let's get started. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Potential is everywhere in the Choctaw people. It's in our schools and students. It's in our small businesses and entrepreneurs. Potential is in our lifestyle and health. It's in our culture and heritage. Passion and commitment is in our blood. Ingenuity and economy are a tradition. And the Choctaw Foundation was founded for this potential. To cultivate minds and hearts, to stimulate ideas and passions, to extend lives and improve health through education, and to preserve and promote the power of our past. The Choctaw Foundation, meeting the potential of the Choctaw people.
Imagine having a dispute with your neighbor or a family member or rival, and the only way to settle it is to set up two teams to play a game so brutal, so fierce, that the results could mean death. You face off, drums playing in the background, pounding to a beat just like the heart, which is 60 beats per minute. With each beat, the two teams gear up for this game almost as they would for war, screaming their cries of assumed victory before even starting, the drumming and shouting all accumulating until released to play. There is no protective equipment and very few rules. And so the game begins, injuries and all. The preciseness of hitting a tiny ball onto a small pole can only be best performed by generations of warriors passing down their skill and focus. That same focus that came from those who hunted the stealthy deer and the swift fish. Surely this game reflects centuries of these skills passed down from ancestors. Whoever wins not just the dispute, but also their tribes, teams, and opposition's respect. Believe it or not, this game is still played today. However, it's played for fun, not to settle disputes. And one of the beautiful things is that it brings fellow natives together. It's called Stickball, or in Choctaw, Kapachatoli, and it's as brutal a game today as it was many years ago. Teeth can be knocked out, limbs can be broken, and at the very least, even t-shirts are torn to shreds from opponents clawing their way to victory. Today, we'll hear from three experts in two parts on this topic, Stickball, Little Brother of War. So listeners, please welcome my first guest and fellow Choctaw friend, Brenner Billy. Halito, Brenner, and welcome.
Halito, thanks for having us.
So glad you're here. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time about this topic. It's obviously something that's exciting for people to know, and a lot of people actually don't know that Stickball even exists. So thanks for all you're doing to make our culture and traditions come alive with your documentaries. So Brenner, tell us more about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, Oklahoma, and I graduated from there in 2009, and then I went to college for numerous years and actually resided in Durant. From there, I actually started working for the nation. And then my career working with the nation and actually being in school at the same time, I had numerous departments. I worked with language departments, worked with cultural services departments prior, and then I worked for human resources and training and development programs there for about 4 years. So I definitely had a lot of transitions, definitely. Yeah. A lot of transitions helped me professionally, too. I was able to speak better, get my point across from a cultural standpoint to other people who were not familiar with that. Mm-hmm. So that definitely helped me to actually, again, transcend what I knew culturally into the ears of non-cultural hearers.
Well, and you even helped me a little bit with some of my words, so yeah. Much appreciated.
Definitely, I definitely understand it. So I grew up, again in Brooklyn. Majority of my family is there, still resides there. I have a huge family that's there, whole network within the McCurtain County area, districts 1 and 2, and even some would say 7, just all the way around there. And so pretty much where I grew up from. And then my background, I am a Choctaw member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, but my heritage leans a little bit towards the Alabama Coshada or Casadi, which they now reside in Texas.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So yeah, the Alabama Coshada tribe, they actually have a little reservation near Livingston, Texas today. And so that's probably about a couple hours away from Houston. But there they actually were removed from the original homelands from Louisiana, Alabama area to Texas around after the time that we were removed to Oklahoma.
1830s-ish.
So, yeah. And so my family, my grandmother's father, my Nan, we call her Nan, he is the actual Coshada, or half Coshada. But they have a distinctive relationship. The language is very close to Choctaw. Some people will consider it as like, how some people could understand Creek and Seminole amongst the two. Like Choctaw and Chickasaw, that kind of same dialect too. Like Choctaw can understand Chickasaws and vice versa. So the Coshada and the Alabama, they're actually two different tribes, but now they are considered as one, which they actually are able to speak the same thing.
Really?
So like Choctaw, Chickasaw.
So if you're down there, you can speak or understand at least to some degree, right? Or is it dialect difference? Or
it's definitely a dialect difference, and it's so funny. Whenever I was down there a couple of years, that we were just generally talking to people, and just some things that they would say that's in Choctaw is like one letter off, and I was like, I wouldn't use that letter there, but I understand what I would ask. Did you say this? And they're like, yeah, and I was like, well, we say this, and like, oh yeah, it's so close, and
it's like Paoli, Oklahoma. We say Paola.
Yeah, there you go. Definitely. So, speaking of language, though, my career with the nation, I was a part-time as a student worker with the Choctaw Ikana, the School of Choctaw Language.
Perfect.
And I was to be a language teacher, and so there, I just I was trying to go through school and just be able to find a career because I was getting a little bit older. I was like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? So I just kind of clinged on to, having an opportunity to work with my grandparents. And so I necessarily didn't work with them directly. I worked with all the other teachers more than I ever saw my grandparents.
Oh, that's funny.
No, it was like they meant to do that in rotation. So I was like, all right. I definitely had the opportunity to work with other teachers. And from there, I just, I expanded. And so sometimes I would ask, my grandparents this and that, but to a level that they thought of me speaking, I wasn't there just yet, but they were immersing or having that immersive conversation with me.
Would you say you're fully fluent at this point?
I don't think so, no.
Is anybody really? I mean, it's such a rare...
there are still some fluent speakers, some bilingual speakers.
Like your grandparents?
Yes. Right? If you want to hear Choctaw first, or speakers that have Choctaw first, they are still that generation. And then there are some generations that are probably a decade older than I am. Yeah. That Choctaw was probably the first language growing up, but then became more dominant with English. But today's society, people who are my age and younger, mostly English first, and then Choctaw learner, not Choctaw fluency. So that's kind of definitely what I understand the challenge even back then in 2010 that we were facing. Are we going to have Choctaw speakers in the next decade versus are we going to make Choctaw speakers generally? So the educational system, it definitely put us on a platform to actually move forward to saying not other tribes are doing what Choctaw Nation is doing, is putting a lot of these classes in through distance learning throughout Choctaw country and even to colleges, which is fine and good. But we spent more time doing that than reflecting on. Within the last 4 or 5 years, we actually started, the department actually expanded more of actually incorporating Choctaw back into the departments of HQ and even to casinos, which is commerce, and then even health services. So that was definitely the expansion. I would say whenever Minko Batten got into office, that he actually had those 9 core values and the main 3 that kind of set faith, family, and culture. That's where it was a pivotal point where everyone was like, what is culture? And so that's where I actually got to be when I was in training. Yeah. That's where I wasn't the only one though, but there was some other people that had different levels and degrees that were with management, for me, I was more about to, non-leadership and some supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely to get that culture. So I had a good, stable job, to actually be part of that. So I had a soft skills training as well. But that movement, those values, what kind of brought some more light to culture. Now, how far did we dive into that? That's another conversation and a whole other thing. But still, that is cool. Is definitely pulling a business mindset in a nation and actually bringing up culture at the same time. And so even today, Chief Patton reflects that too.
So your grandparents are pretty much fluent, and then you grew up hearing it, I'm sure, and then you've been working on continuing that language. And then when you went to college, were you around other Choctaw speakers at all?
No, I wasn't. I very rarely saw Native people at all.
Really?
And so I went to the University of Central Oklahoma, and there was actually a multitude of other ethnic groups representation there, and the Native community wasn't very big there at that time. There were some people that were Native descent and that were probably tribal members, but none of them was trying to be involved in like a group like people would say Native American Student Association or multicultural diversity, which I was a part of that movement then. But we probably had 6 or 7 students in the beginning, and then we kind of, ventured out, and some left and some replaced. So it was just definitely not a big Native community that was, to me, relative, because I was Choctaw, but I wasn't a powwow goer. And so a lot of the Native tribes that were in there were from the plain style. And so, again, there you have that clash of Oklahoma, the Indian Territory, where there are all these tribes removed here. So you do have that melting pot, or that multitude of tribal people. So whenever some people say, are you Native American or are you indigenous? Some people say, yeah, and they're all the same. But then whenever I had firsthand meeting with my friend Ben, he was not Choctaw or any Southeast Native. He was someone from the Plains tribes. And then I met some people that were Arapaho, people that were Kiowa, and then I had some people that were from the Northeast. And I was like, I never heard of these things. And just, to me, my Native lens was expanded, but definitely my Native expression got definitely smaller, because definitely being in that city, that area. So there wasn't that many people that were Native there, and so I didn't practice as much as the language or my identity as much in the culture. I did do a handful of things that I was capable to doing that were Choctaw specific, but not a lot of people grasped the concept. Yeah. And so, because they were also, college overall is just trying to find who you are. Whether you find something that you're totally not and you get interested in it, that's fine too. We had some students that were definitely Native, but didn't fit the bill to being in a mainstream, but didn't want to go to full Native because they didn't fit that. They were just in that gray space. Right. And so there were some things that we tried. So I did a lot of stickball there because it's in my blood, it's my family. And so
it's in your DNA.
Yeah, definitely. So I just tried to do as much as what I could know what to do. And I hosted a game there around 2010. It had to be 2010 because I graduated 2009, so 2010, and I actually moved to Durant 2011. That's what it was. Okay. So yeah, around 2010, that's when I actually had a little stickball event there. But I didn't have the connects, and you didn't have the type of social media platform you do now.
Well, so, the first year of college can be challenging for anyone, but when you left home and went to college, you really faced some additional hardships. From when you and I talked about before, it was like you were always surrounded by your Choctaw folks, for the most part, right? And then you mentioned how later that you had some culture shock, big city versus little town, not used to not seeing Choctaw faces, as you mentioned before. But then you talked about learning to walk two paths. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, definitely. And so whenever I was going to school there, I did find some people that were interesting to me and some people that were relative to me. Yeah. I'd actually started to feel homesick more just because I couldn't just drive down there, like some of these students that go and school during the week and just go home because it's so close. I was 4 hours away, or 4.5 hours away from my home. It was easy to just make that little drive and come back, every Friday evening and Sunday night, whatever. So whenever I saw some people that reminded me of home, which they were more country folk that were also there too. Like they were there because they went to school as far as they could and just similar. So they were non-native, but they were just, had some of the values that I remember seeing at home. This really kind of country, kind of hickish, or, people that I had the same slang and just little same understanding. So, and then I actually did see an individual. He actually became a really good friend of mine and still is a good friend of mine. He was actually a Choctaw Chickasaw mix too from Ardmore, but I always played against his younger brother in Stickball. And so there I had a port or a connection with, because he was also around those country people too. So there I definitely started to come around more around there and just kind of open up a little bit, coming out of my shell, being able to be sociable to those types of people. Because when I went to class, I just went to class and talked to nobody and just came back. And they happened to be a group of guys and they were a fraternity. And I didn't know that. And I was like, because I just saw these big letters on this house.
Yeah.
And I was like, no one really told me about that. I've seen movies and heard, the term frat. And I was like, I'll never be one of those individuals that would be in a frat. And then whenever I started talking to them more, they were pretty cool individuals and just a multitude, just like diverse people. And so the values was what I was understanding and seeing more. And so I just liked hanging around them more. So I hung around them, like once a week. Then it became a couple of days of the week. And then every event that they had, they were in rush. And so when they were rushing to find new recruits, I kind of fell into one of those things and I was unsure. And so I got out of it. So I had like a whole year before I actually made the decision to join.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, they kept me around. Like, they still invited me to some places to go hang out and go eat. And they had their own things that they do for the fraternity. But then what I liked about them is that they were graduating, too. So how do I get on that level? Then, just some things changed. And so some people didn't show up the next semester. So I started seeing this mainstream society where, everyone wants this, everyone wants that, everyone wants to work here, everyone wants to do their own thing. I was just trying to take a taste of everything that was happening on campus, and then off campus, it's kind of the same thing. And I was wondering how these individuals had the supports, or where they come from, or if they made it on their own, or if they had their own family that were supporting them. I just kind of just looked at them. And at the time when I saw those things happening, I was like, well, that's very fortunate for them. But then after all, when I started seeing those people that were working on their own and actually making things happen, like they would work a full-time job after school, and then they would, do all night studying just for them to sleep 2 hours, just go back to class and do it all over again.
Yeah.
And so that drive, that hustle is kind of what I loved, because I kind of grew up from some hustlers. And so we don't, when you think of hustling, I mean, that's, you actually, make things to actually support your family. That's what I always grew up. My dad did sticks, and my mom, she did clothes, some of the regalia, some beadwork. My aunties did a lot of beadwork, and we just did a variety of things. And we always worked towards something, whether it was to celebrate, to have a gathering or a birthday party, or someone's anniversary, someone having a baby, some things like that, where it's just to have a celebratory. So that hustle is what I kind of liked. And so I kind of wanted to dabble more into that side. But my hand was in too many things. I spread myself thin. And so I started to say, well, which one am I going to do? So I actually started to dabble more into the mainstream. I liked to, what people would say kind of lobby today, but networking. I networked with a lot of people in the fraternity. When I ended up joining, I actually had a whole different realm of people that were, older, that were kind of like advisors, that kind of led me to different areas. I went to conferences that I never thought I would go to conferences. And those conferences, I met other young gentlemen like myself at the time, and they had different diverse backgrounds. And I was like, wow, this is just, just definitely opens your eyes. And how people would see social media today, like so many Twitter followers, so many Facebook followers. This is actually saw it in person. Like there's all these people of all different colors, all different backgrounds, and it was just a honest, thing for students, for young men to actually be part of that, working society, but also for education, and also having a compassion for what they believed into the fraternity. So I was emphatic with that. So that's why I joined. Prior to that, and then when I joined, I saw tenfold. And so I started doing that a lot more, and actually got to be more promoted, held an officer's position in that. I was an educator for new upcoming members. And so I was really doing a lot of that stuff. And a lot of my identity as a Native American, or as a Choctaw specifically, I wasn't doing that as much. And so a lot of the language, I would still hear things at home, and I would say things back in Choctaw, but then I had, those Choctawisms never went away, but I started having this distinctive, like, taste where it's like, that's not really funny, or like, or that's not, how you perceive it. It's not a high value as much anymore as I used to think. And it's just kind of, you start to see, you get exposed to different things, and you start to lose a different feel for those things. And I felt that, and I was doing some of those things, stopped hanging around some people, then they're like, oh, why are you acting all different? And I was like, well, I just, just don't see how that's funny. And then I felt like I was a bit uppity, and I started noticing that, not with just my friends, but some of my relatives. And my relatives, again, that's overall family. And so, like, when I got into the mainstream of networking and business stuff, like, no one's your friend. They're acquaintances and they help you out, but
not like family.
No, not like family. And so when you actually make someone a family member that's not your family, then that's like all the time. So I ended up having good friends coming out of that mainstream area, then versus rekindling, and not only, I guess, looking at my friends at home, like, you can't do this or you should do that. It's more like, well, how do I introduce that to them to actually expand it? Which they eventually did too. It's just probably a maturity thing too. I don't think I was maturing as fast as I thought I was back then, but
well, I mean, all these new worlds had opened up to you. I mean, you went from feeling like a fish out of water and standing out like a sore thumb, and then not feeling like you're finding the right friendships or whatever, to then becoming a kind of a leader and feeling like you were getting a hold of things. But then sometimes the pendulum starts to swing too far. It's like, oh, y'all, I'm pretty hot stuff, man.
Like you're just saying, you kind of explained it well, to where you're not exposed to that, and like, but it is different. It's difficult. It's about learning about yourself mostly.
True.
And like,
true.
When you cling on to something, then you cling on to it.
Would you change it? Like, if you could have gone to an all-native college, for instance, would you have done it?
If I knew then, I would have done it.
Yeah.
But if I had the ability to go back and do it, I probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So like the path that I walked.
Yeah. Right.
But if I knew, first of all, second of all, I never wanted to go to Haskell just because there's a lot of natives there, and I was like, well, I just want to do something different. And I don't want to go that far from home.
Yeah.
But
that's Kansas, right?
Yeah, that's Kansas. But then again, I didn't know, like, tuition and stuff. I didn't understand that completely, because whenever I was going to college, when I was in high school, I was just told, you better fill out those applications. Like, there's no, like, advisor at school. Like, they helped you if you needed help. But then as a Native person, I didn't want to ask for help because I was just ready to get out of high school.
Yeah,
football was over.
just ready to go.
Just ready to go. And then I'm getting told from, my parents. My parents worked, and they were also, my mom was doing school too. And so, my brother and sister were younger. They were 7 and 9 years younger than I am. Wow. So it's like, I'm just that one that's about to leave, but needs to do it on their own, kind of. So
same. It was all on my own.
Yeah. But if I'd known that Fort Collins was available, or that I could actually have tuition there and just went there, I probably wouldn't have went there.
Well, and I mean, even then, I feel like if there's any young people listening today, I hope when you're in college that you'll look for those people who maybe do feel like they're a fish out of water. It could be any ethnicity, any person. It could be a white person. Doesn't matter. But we should all come together as a community. We're all away from home. Let's all try to help each other feel comfortable and invite people to do different things, activities, go to lunch together, whatever. So don't forget to be kind and to reach out.
Yeah, definitely break those barriers that you hold against other people, just the way they look, and then letting down your own barriers too, to be open-minded. Yeah, I wasn't open-minded.
Okay, right.
And so it took me a year to be open-minded when I was in school. So understandably,
it's a protection element.
Defensive, yeah.
Now, eventually, you went on to meet your lovely wife, and I love the story of how y'all met. How did you meet?
So we actually met at the college that I transferred to, and just so happened that I had stopped going to college and actually went to work full-time for cultural services. Mm-hmm. At the same time, that director at the Native American Institute, he actually had a collaboration with the Chickasaw Nation. And so Choctaw Nation and Chickasaw Nation were kind of borderlining with Southeastern Oklahoma State University. So they had a summer program for like students that are going to college. And that's probably the first time I actually had met my wife, but I wasn't like talking to her because she was just young. And so it wasn't until the next year we actually did a demonstration. We had an exhibition, and it was just a social game of stickball. And so it was all of them, and I'd done one before the year prior. So whenever I did this year, that next year where my wife was at, she was just 18 and just turned 18 and was, finishing up and probably going to go to college somewhere else. I think that's what she was saying. And so that was kind of the deal where we actually played stickball. And I had some friends from the community in Durant area. Mind you, back then, a lot of people didn't play as much as they do now. So it was kind of like 5 or 6 main ones that were around this area. We kind of showed up and played and balled out. And so it was just always a fun thing, definitely, to have that social game. And so that social game is different than our original Istibuli or Pochetoli game. Mm-hmm. It allows women to have a better advantage by using hands, or they could use sticks if they wanted to. But the objective is actually hit a fish or a skull at a 20-foot post. And so whenever the females play, we always tell the boys or the males, definitely do not hit the girls, but they can hit you. Don't ever swing your stick.
It'd be hard not to, though. There's so much going on. It's moving so fast.
It is. And just for the guys that remove their hands and use sticks, it definitely, if you look at it from a learner's perspective, that it's all a new world. So, But whenever we had them play, I just remember these 2 girls. It was her and her friends. They were actually like athletes. They were track stars and basketball players. Cool. And looked like some gazelles just running all over the place. And I'm thinking, I'm not running nobody here. But what I can do is I can catch the ball, I can shoot it, and I can do a little bit of trick plays.
Plus, you're like 7 feet tall, so they only see you coming and they just run away.
Well, the thing is, though, we told them prior that girls can tackle the guys, but the guys can't hit the girls, because some of them were conditioned. Because some of them were actually Creek and Seminole, and sometimes when you play in that, they allow guys allowed to be roughhoused with a female. So that was some of our ground rules, definitely from my perspective and from our director's perspective, to not be hostile to females. So whenever we said that, some of those girls' ears kind of perked up. And like, okay. And so we see some people getting thrashed, some guys getting hit to the side, and just like a little mini war zone out there. And
the girls are taking us down, man.
And there's always been more girls that show up to those types of events than boys, and just feel so bad for the boys that are actually trying to learn at the same time, and they just get knocked out, by a blind side.
That is awesome.
But yeah, we kind of met in that way, and they were just running around, and I do a little trick play on them, just kind of like make them miss me or go after the ball, or just because I used to play with a lot of older people, and they would do those things to me when I was growing up. So I just kind of did the same thing. And so you meet, a lot of performance or a lot of fast athletes, but when they don't know how the game, then you have the advantage where your skill takes a little bit more over than their speed and whatever. Yeah. But once they have that skill as well as speed, then you're probably out of luck if you're out of shape. So, which I was out of shape, and I probably wasn't feeling it that day, but I just remember I would shoot, and I would hit that post or that fish. I think we actually lost that game. I think we lost twice, to be honest, because we were outnumbered like almost 2-1.
Really?
Yeah, guys versus girls. But still, playing and being able to make people miss, that was just always fun.
Yeah.
And I remember after the game, or that little game, we had a break, and I think it was only like an hour or so, a lot of time, and then all those students had to go back to the dorm, because they stayed in the dorm for a whole week, and they had a whole lot of things going on that week. Mm-hmm. I just remember sitting under the shade on this little pathway on the bench, and then she kind of comes up to me and just sits next to me, and she's like, "Hey." I was like, "Hey." just so awkward. Romantic. Just awkward. And she was like, "I like your hair." And I was like, "Thanks."
Was your hair nicely coiffed?
No, it was not. So I used to have a mohawk that went straight back. Cool. But it was long, so whenever it was growing long, I actually would have it in rubber bands, and it would go all the way back and kept the sides shaved. And then whenever it got longer, I started getting it braided all the way back.
Cool.
So I had a little braided mohawk.
So she was all about it.
I guess so. And then I asked her, I was like, why'd you even come over there? She's like, well, my bag was over there first. I was like, really? I was like, I did not notice no bag over there. And so
smooth.
And so after our conversational piece was like, I like your headband. And I was like, dang, what else you like? I was just kind of like, just like, I was like this young person trying to talk to me. I really wasn't really having it. And she tells me that, reminds me of that every time. She's like, you didn't even like me then. And I was like, you're just younger than I was. I don't know. I was in a different phase at the time. I was going through some things, I guess. I don't know.
Like you had blinders on.
Yeah, I had blinders on. I was like, you gotta be upfront with me.
So focused.
I know. I was like, I don't read nothing. I was like, you gotta be blunt.
That's hilarious.
And so she was like, yeah, I like that headband. I was like, yeah, my mom made it. And I was like, yeah. And I was always, again, about hustling. I was like, I was like, hey, I can send you what she can make. And I was like, I'll sell it to you or something like that.
Yeah.
That's how our conversation started. And it just ended really quick. So I was like, I was trying to be just strictly business. And
yeah.
I went until that end of that summer where they had, I think it was the end of summer, but they actually had the Jim Thorpe games.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I was just coming back from the World Series, and we had lost, in the first round in the World Series of Stickball in Mississippi. And so on my way back, she started messaging me, and she's like, hey, where you at? And I was like, why? And I was like, because I was like, we haven't talked in like months. She's like, well, Chickasaws are here in Jim Thorpe, and they're beating up on Choctaws. I was like, oh, wow. I was like, well, everyone deserves to win sometime. So I just started talking that way and talking smack. And I was like, no, that's still cool.
She's Chickasaw. Chickasaw, right?
She's Chickasaw, yeah. And so I was like, well, that's cool. I was like,
a little banter.
I was like, even some of your Chickasaw players are playing with us here. So I was like, it's just something that's happening. I was like, that's good for the game. And then after that, we just kind of talked. And she's like, hey, I'm going to Southeastern. And then there was like, oh, I was like, and then we actually started talking after that, just little by little. I was like, you're not going to Southeastern. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, and then we just started talking more. And then I was actually working over at Cultural Services then. And then I was going place to place and just, send her little pictures in here. The places I went to California, I went to Oregon, went to just almost all over the states with the chief and those things. So she was kind of interested then. So I was interested when she was at school. So that's where we started, dating. And then we actually started dating and hanging out more. And then soon after that, we were actually expecting our son. So it just kind of happened all pretty quick. And
well, and speaking of, there was a challenging time once again in your life that actually led to creativity, right? Having to do with your son and your wife.
Definitely. So again, to our little love story.
Yeah.
Trying to be an adult and then trying to work full time. And I actually went back to college while I was working full time while she was going to school, and we had a 6-month-old. Mm. And so she actually wanted to go and finish her undergrad at OSU. So, which is in Stillwater, which is probably 4 hours, 4.5, maybe 5 hours away from Durant. And so I was working. I had just transferred out of Cultural Services and went to HR. I was the admin there, or an assistant, an HR assistant. I was learning a lot of different things. I was getting paid a little bit more, and actually was able to stay home. And with this decision, that's what she wanted to do. And so I kind of I couldn't tell her no. And so I was like, well, I guess me and Brenner are going to stay here. And she's like, no, he needs his mom. And I was like, you don't leave me all by myself. And that's what it was.
Rough, yeah.
Yeah. And we just had gotten an apartment. We've been in an apartment for about a year and just make the move. And I was like, oh, what's happening? And then she's like, I'm just going to go to school. I'm not leaving you. And I was like, I got abandonment issue. No.
Just hold me.
I'm still trying to figure myself out. But yeah, she went there, and then, I actually ended up getting picked up to training. And then I had a promotion after I graduated and actually moved to training. And so just filling in this void with my family gone and me going up there every weekend, it just got stressful. Yeah. She was trying to do things as an undergrad, but still be as a mom. She had her sister there with her to help out with our son. So it kind of worked out. But the thing is, though, during, Monday through Thursday, it just got kind of lonely. It got kind of, after work was over, didn't really have any close friends because everyone that I worked with was just older than I was, which I was grateful for because I learned a lot from them. Yeah. But then again, all my younger people, they were worked in cultural services or in different areas, and they were gone every weekend or every week, and then I couldn't be where they are, so I just like kind of like felt like I was doing time, you know, where just like, what can I do? So I did get kind of upset. I was feeling kind of depressed, and I think there was something with Southeastern. Someone had asked to fix sticks or to buy new sticks, and I was like, I don't think I can make sticks, so I don't have none of my tools here, nor do I have tools then. I didn't have tools then. I just had a few things that were in my grandpa's garage that was all broken and rusted, and and my dad and my family were in Broken Bow, so like I either chose to go see my family or go see my parents, my other family. And so it was either I was sacrificing one for another, whether if I was to expand or whether I was to be with my family, my own family. And so I ended up saving money, making money, and taking care of my son's daycare. And man, I was grateful to have that new job, but then again, like all my money was just going to support them, to my family, to my son. And daycare, you know, then he was just almost a year old.
He was little.
Yeah, he was not almost a year. He was already a year old, probably going into 2. I think he might be around 2. That daycare over there in Stillwater was like $700 a month. So I was like, geez, I could have bought someone's car. I could have bought my own house. You know, just
Daycare is so expensive.
And I just got the new car too, which I was grateful, just so I could make sure my car goes back and forth, that I had a dependable vehicle.
Yeah.
And so how do I make up for the spending? And so someone actually had bought sticks from me or wanted to buy sticks. And they said, yeah, whatever you would like, or how much would it cost? And I was like, well, to make these sticks, it's going to be this amount of money. Like, all right, that's fine. Give me 4 of them. I'm like, what?
Oh my goodness.
I was like, all right, well, I guess I better get on that. And so I did. And I was like, I don't have a place. Like so I'll send you some pictures. That's where I first started.
Okay. I'd love to see
And then I recreated that type of environment outside here in Durant, my grandparents' backyard.
Cool.
And so when I was doing those things, it was just a lot of work, and I stayed out late. And then after that order was completed, I was like, there's got to be a better way to make these things. And I started watching how it's made, and, I started watching YouTube videos. I think I had finally gotten a YouTube subscription. And then I was just watching a lot of like how people do manufacturing stuff. So how can I, as a person, do those types of things into my format, my culture, or to my
hustling?
Yes,
came
my
from
hustle.
a long line of people who work hard.
Got to change the game a bit, and so I did. So I found my grandparents had a shed, and no one ever used the shed. It was just there whenever they bought it, and it was full of dirt. It had a lot of tires in there, and little critters were in there, and looked like they had done past and whatnot. And so I was like, I just looked at it as, an opportunity. And I had to ask my grandparents first, like, you mind if I just turn that into a little working area? He's like, yeah, go ahead. Because first of all, it was getting too cold to actually be outside. Because I was outside. I was literally outside working with a board that I attached to a tree and shaving these staves into sticks outside. And so I was like, I just didn't want to be inside. I just don't want the cold breeze on, because you're bundled up, pants, sweaters.
People don't know it gets really cold here in the winter, especially with the wind when it blows.
It's just a weird place. And so I started cleaning it up, and a lot of dirt, a lot of things, clean it out. And there's still some stuff that's in there that I finally cleaned out not too long ago that was like, dang, that was here whenever they first moved here. I can't believe I didn't miss that, because I just cleaned enough area that was just for me to move around in. And I think I kept the dirt in there too, just so that it kind of helped insulated, some of the area, because there's no insulation. It was pretty much a hollow shell, but it was definitely better than being exposed to the wind. So when I did that, I started saying, what else can I do, and to actually help progress. And then those 4 sticks or a pair of sticks became easier to make. I started questioning, why do I have to make it this way? Why can't I still apply the same rule but do this? And so over that year time, I actually dabbled in what I had. I was making good enough money to support, daycares, to support my vehicle and all the things that I needed. So I put little investments into maybe this business. And so, because a lot of people weren't making sticks here, especially Choctaw, Oklahoma, or Oklahoma Choctaws weren't making sticks.
Yeah.
So our relatives in Mississippi, they still make sticks because they have the knowledge and they have the resource.
Yeah.
So here in Oklahoma, there's only literally a few people. And my dad and myself were only the other 2 that I knew that were still making them in Oklahoma. The rest of them just forgot it or died out or never transitioned it to another generation. So I just felt prideful because that was one thing that I could do that I was getting better at. And so when I did that more often, I was just like, wow. And so from then, making a pair of sticks took me a long time. When I say a long time, like a week or two, for getting it, processing it, shaving it down, bending it. I could do it all within a day, but to actually make it dry,
Wow.
To make it dry and make it to where I was happy enough with it to actually get to a person. It took me about a week to get it to that, or a couple of weeks to get to that stage. And that was like, 1 to 5 pairs. Now, kind of fast forward, that drive, that hustle, I'm able to make 20 within a week.
Are you serious?
Yeah, if I actually spend my time doing it.
I thought 1 to 5 was pretty good.
Yeah.
So you've really learned how to streamline that process. And there's different components, obviously, that we'll talk about later about the sticks and the ball itself. So it sounds like, is it that you're taking certain parts, you're like, okay, now we make all the net, now we make all the...
Yeah, it's pretty much, it's stages and phases. And so whenever I saw that I can make those things better, that's when I started investing more in that. So my drive to actually have that hustle to support my family, but also it's been my time, that loneliness or that little depressive state, I was taking that negative energy and putting it into something positive.
Love that.
And so I loved it too. And like, I was so excited. I would actually learn stuff at work that was work related. And then towards the end of the day, I was so excited to get to the house so I can actually do something productive as well. Cause I was learning a lot of stuff, mentally. I was learning a lot of stuff like that was pertaining to the work, it was pertaining to training. I was getting like a lot of knowledge dumped into my head, and then I needed to exercise that. So the best way that I learned how to do exercise or move my hands was just with sticks. And so I would pick up logs, I would split them, I would do it by hand, and then I would start shaving by hand. I was getting a movement. I was growing. And so I was having the best of two worlds in a way with that. And so I was being very productive at work, being very productive after work, spending time quick. I'll tucker myself out, go to sleep, and do it all over again. And I was still like being correspondence with my family, talk to them over the phone or see pictures.
Except now you're like, I gotta go make some sticks.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Or before you're like, can you please talk to me some more?
Yeah, that's what it was. And now it's like, hey, I got this going on. And then my wife, she's always like, well, why you always do that? I'm like, I don't know. Just like.
But hey, it's, if nothing else, it's bringing home more bacon too.
Yeah, I finally ended up telling her, I was like, it's just something about it that I love doing. And like, she knows that I love doing it too. Yeah. So that's why she kind of like sticks with me, to stick with it. It's just like, you need to do one or the other. It's because she's like, you can't do both. I mean, you can do both, but it definitely affects you. And I started seeing that definitely in the last couple of years. I was like, well, I had to choose which one. Or choose seasons to actually do it. Yeah,
kind of figure out how to manage your time and all that. Definitely. So what does it mean to you as a Choctaw to be able to make these sticks?
It's definitely something that I think about this every time whenever I make them, and sometimes I don't think about anything at all, but I do reflect of where I learned this knowledge. This knowledge came from my dad. The knowledge that came from him was from my grandpa. And the knowledge that came to my grandpa was from our great uncle Cleveland, and then from him it was probably someone that was older. And so, to me, when I started making it, it's just kind of like I come from a family that has been cultural keepers for decades, and so I just felt like this is probably. At first, I felt like I was continuing a phase or a step that my dad was doing, because that's all I remember growing up, to make ends meet. You gotta make some sticks. Some people love sticks. They want to see it as wall hangers. Some people want to use them. It's just people just admire the arts and the versatility of it, actually using it. And so I just felt like I was just continuing his work in a way. Not that I find that I should make my own path in the way of doing it too. And then now, of remembering and learning from him, and then asking him questions, and even asking grandpa questions, and even my great uncles, which is my grandpa's brothers, they actually give me little tidbits here and there. And it's like, as a Choctaw person, to make these sticks, it's just like, it's empowering. It shows that a lot of people don't have the ability to do these things as Choctaw people and as people in general, because not a lot of people like doing the woodworking. People just rather buy something that's mass produced and it's for lower quality. And some people don't understand just how things are made by hand. Everything's just so refined.
Yeah.
And so whenever I looked at making sticks, I started understanding that things from nature, we embody it all the time. It's just in a refined states. And so I was just sitting there thinking, how cool and how interesting is it that you actually put your self-worth into something that's natural, that becomes something else that's symbolic to years of transition, years of hardship, and then to definitely for years of celebration and revitalization. And so I never saw myself as being that way until maybe the second or third year, whenever I started doing it more often, until I was like, I definitely need to be better at this, because who am I going to teach to actually do this? Because to me, that's probably the true fashion of how our understanding of oral traditions, of our knowledge, it has to be taught by somebody. And so I'm learning just so that I can pass it on to somebody else. And to me, I always felt like it was family oriented, when my son was born the first or second year, I think he was probably 3 whenever Pope had passed away. And so my great grandfather's name's Pope, but his name's Ed.
Right.
But but he passed away. But before he passed away, him, my grandpa, my dad, myself, and my son, there's 5 generations of Billies.
Wow.
And so that was something that we were all in our Choctaw regalia. It's just for us. And so you don't get that too often. And so I was just sitting there thinking, I was like, well, I need to be able to be efficient enough, but also learn the ins and outs so that whenever it's have his time coming, that this is who is going to carry the fire, who's going to continue moving on. And then within the last recent years, sometimes I started feeling like that was kind of selfish, because why am I just holding all this knowledge and bearing all this stuff? Why can't I start to find people that can also have the same passion to actually do it themselves as well?
Awesome.
And so I think in true, almost a Billy fashion, but in true, my family's fashion is that, we taught almost just about anyone and everyone. And what they brought from that, or what they took from that, is where they become implemented in different parts of the nation, or even in the states that relate or that pertain to anything that deals with Native American governments or tribes. It gives them that perspective. And so my grandfather, he started with students in Brookmore area, AILYC, which is American Indian Youth Leadership Council. And that was kind of the first NASA, if you will, that we had in high school. But those individuals actually began to do something later on in their lifetime, and work for the BIA, work for other tribes that were not their own, but also about different perspectives, and actually became instrumental in things that were not only Choctaw Nation, but other nations as well. And so I thought that was pretty awesome.
That is cool. I like that.
And so I started to see, I guess my passion was, or still is, making sticks, but now it's more of like, who's going to take my place? And that, I think a lot of people don't think that, because we grew up I'll say we, but myself, I grew up in a generation where it's like, you'll never be Michael J, or you'll never be LeBron, or like, who's the next one that's going to be the big dog and whatnot.
Right.
And well, they also had to rely on, Pippen, and, you had to have everybody else that's on the team. And so it's like, if I'm just one person, and if I happen just to pass or have an accident, and all my progress is for nothing. I mean, it'll just be told as a story, and that's where it'll stay. And so that's where I started seeing more of well, when I'm gone, who will be doing this? So that's a lot of recording, a lot of pictures, even just mapping things out, and then trying to teach people more about how to do this. So when I reflect as a Choctaw person, when we talk about Stickball, making it's all those embodiments of, past to the present, and to where we're going to the future. All those aspects of, I guess you carry that definitely with you whenever I carry that with me whenever I start making those sticks and saying that I can do this, but I also can do other things as well. And so I think that's just kind of my little vision, definitely that I think over and over again whenever I make them, that I am able to do something that's not normal, or I don't say normal, but it's not popular,
right?
To make it.
It's a very rare, narrow niche.
It is, and I'm glad to be a part of it. Within the last probably 4 years, there's been some makers come about, actually not only in Choctaw but also Chickasaw. So I have some friends in the Ada area that are actually Chickasaw stickball makers, who we all learned from this almost similar people in different perspectives in different areas. And so I'm with Justin Skaggs, the Wood Lacrosse. He actually did a little series over us, and he actually kind of gave us a little platform. But it just shows a different variety of individual people, that where they come from, what they make, and I just absolutely love that. And because even though we have a similarity, we're all still so different too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I think overall, that's pretty much my thinking of how it means to me as a stickball person and maker, and as a Choctaw person. It just kind of comes in full circle in a way.
Well said. That's impressive. But what a great story of turning a rough time into something beautiful. And you're lucky in that you get to use your talents in your career with the Choctaw Nation, right?
Yes. And so currently I work for the Choctaw Cultural Center.
Okay.
And so it is a tier in the cultural services realm. Cultural services has historic preservation and cultural events in the cultural center. I'm definitely elated to come back to be part of the nation. It's just coming back home, you know?
Yeah.
And definitely here, being in the Durant area, you're able to make those impacts. And even when I worked in training, it was just the way that I understood that the HQ was being built. I mean, the headquarters was being built, and then like the expansion, and then other things. This is a point in Choctaw country where it gets a lot of exposure. And I felt like it was definitely a good opportunity to be here, but also I correlated coming from home. And so everything that I do, I relate it to my home, because some people think this town is Choctaw Nation. That's not it. 10.5 counties southeast of Oklahoma, that is Choctaw country. That is Choctaw Nation.
Point.
And so think about it as a mosaic. You know, we all have our particular pieces, and that we fit, and that makes this beautiful artwork. That is us as a nation. And so
love that.
Yeah, I've probably said this a couple times or two. So.
Oh, you must have. It came out very naturally. Good job.
It is. But I mean, that's how I felt, and that's how I see it too. To where, you know, without my district or without my home area, I wouldn't be who I am, and wouldn't be what I'm doing here in the nation. So I'd always pay respect and honor to where I come from, that particular district. And so working here at the Cultural Center, I'm able to put every aspect that I learned within HR, within training, from language, even prior cultural services, and into putting it into the center where it's now a staple, to where we're able to have our guests come see us instead of us going to see them. We're not an outreach. We are a area where you come to get this knowledge, this exposure. And you don't get it in the first try. That's what's interesting. Every individual can spend, you know, probably 2 to 4 hours, you know, and the next day when they come spend maybe an hour or so, they probably see something they didn't see the first time. And so it's just so much saturated there with just the facility itself. But then adding our programming, adding our educational stuff, there's like things that we pull from historic preservation, things that we pull from cultural events. There's a lot of things that people just cannot take in just one day or even one weekend.
Well, thank you for sharing about your world. I love your love story of stickball, both the sticks themselves and your wife that you met playing the game. So let's dig into our topic today, the fiercest and oldest game in the country, stickball. From where did stickball originate, and how does it relate to lacrosse as we know it today?
So to my understanding, that stickball has always been here, or Ishtabuli. And as it relates to lacrosse, across this country, all tribes have played field games.
Okay.
Whether they have the physical aspects of putting a ball through a hoop, or having contact with a particular pole, or even just like odds or chance in a way. There's always been this interaction that our native peoples have done to kind of pass time, but also develop skill. And so for stickball specifically, we as Choctaw people, our ancestors, used it as a way of an alternative to war. And so without having too much bloodshed of actually going into war whenever they could not come to a reasonable level grounds in council, then they would actually put this into the area. And so again, people think of, oh, you didn't like it, and so you just played over, game over. Well, that's not totally true. There's actually a lot of politics that go with it then.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to think about, where did America get their politics from?
Good point.
And so that's where that formality, because if you talk about European history itself, you actually have kingship, you have royalty, which they're still doing across the pond today. And so whenever you look at the freedom of America, where it's a spike from the French, but the actual representatives actually had a model too here in the indigenous peoples. And so for us, as Choctaw, our indigenous ways of politics, if it didn't come to a common ground, then it was to have this way of war, a little brother war specifically. And that's where Choctaw, the name Choctaw Istaboli comes into play. Now, Istaboli actually means like to hit, a playing field that is for hitting. And specifically, it means talk about the sticks and the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Kapocha, Toli, is actually the sticks. Kapocha is what we call the sticks, and Toli is like an actionable thing of saying, let's go play it, or let's go do it, that action.
Okay.
It's both similar to each other. Like the Mississippi Choctaws, they actually say Kapocha instead of Kapocha, so it's a P versus a B.
Mm-hmm.
So here we actually have this staple sport as we now know today, but back then it was a way of warfare. And so the victor actually would earn the honor of the opposing tribe or district, and there the settled dispute would play out, and where you wouldn't say that the Choctaws are conquering other tribes, they were just trying to say, this is our resource, our jurisdiction. Now some will say you will conquer it, or you have conquered other tribes. In some instances, there's some stories that have been told that. But overall, it was just a way of handling those types of things when no one came to a conclusion.
I love that you said it was an alternative to war. So I'm thinking, why don't we just globally introduce stickball to everybody so that maybe we can solve the world wars and we can all have peace? Actually, I don't know if Native Americans want everybody playing their game, but, maybe it's an alternative.
Well, the thing is, though, all right, now we're getting to kind of like where some people talk about the spirituality of the game itself. Mm-hmm. To actually have the honor of being a victor, but also having the respect as the defeated, that was still it. You had to have the honor and respect to actually become the victor, but also to play, the defeated as well. Because that's where it made it work. Because if you were too prideful or too greedy to actually, stab you in the back once you walked away as a victor, that is kind of like one of man's imperfections as human beings. And so this dispute was kind of in that spirituality realm, more like this is where it's played fair and done. If a tribe did actually, dishonored that and actually still done stuff, to actually portray, not listening to the victor or whatever, if they tainted that, then they would go to war. And then they would, maul to whatever, because it was a way of saying you disrespected the law.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of Choctaw people and a lot of people in the southeast areas didn't kill each other off the face of the earth, but there were some that did not, that if they neglected that law, then you would see that in their population.
Wow. So interesting.
And so also say and now as we relate it to lacrosse, lacrosse in the northern regions, like the Algonquins, the Onondagas, a lot of tribes up there, there's also variations of lacrosse itself too, like the Shawnee, and they actually play with a different style of one stick.
Oh, really?
And then the Potawatomi themselves, they actually play a different variation with one stick as well. And then as your Iroquoian or Algonquin style with the big netted, like a huge 7 stick that looks like a huge 7, and with the big netting, that was the actual game for lacrosse and its variation. And then they call it a medicine game. And some of the information that I've seen in videos that I've watched, that it was a game that was built by the creator for his amusement or his understanding of which people is worthy of or what have you. And the people standpoint call it the medicine games. And so if you think about it as practicing and playing it as well, it does cleanse you. It does give you that medicine that you need. And so today, whenever we play stickball as a sport, you're still providing that mentality of like competition, but you're also supplementing like peace of exerting your body to actually cleanse the body physically, to clear the mind mentally, and then to kind of keep yourself in check spiritually, not to have anger or any kind of intentional hurts physically or even emotionally to people. It's just a way of carrying oneself and actually leaving it behind and not carrying it, continuing throughout your day. So that's kind of like how we see that perceived today. That's my understanding of how some people will see that as a medicine game in the northern regions, and then how we're trying to kind of explain that in a way today with stickball down here, but more so it's about competition. But that's to my understanding with the medicine games itself. And so I like that correlation there. And so whenever I tell people here about stickball, it's got that same relativeness, but it also goes a little bit more deeper to saying that for war, you're protecting something. You're not just to take over this nation just for the fun of it. There should be no greed. Within reason, there needs to be a way of giving and taking. And I wouldn't say like all indigenous peoples were perfect, that they had their flaws themselves, but overall, it was not to extinguish life, but it's definitely to progress it, promote it. And so whenever we say it in that manner, our warriors, our Tushka, they were brothers, they were fathers, they were sons, nephews, and uncles, and later on to be grandpas, but they all were protecting their families. It's like how you think of people leaving to go have a better opportunity. Is whether I put my life on the line to actually see forward that this next generation will be able to live and carry the same value better than the life that's it's in now. And so that understanding of being a servant is where our people come from. To serve, not as people think as like servants and a butler, but more servants for like, like I'll do this for you because you need it. Or I see a need, I must serve to that need. And so our tribe kind of reflects that too with servant leadership, as Chief Batten has.
Yes.
That's where you see something, say something, or if it's not your job, you can still do it. And to me, that's what I remember growing up too. Like, I don't know why we had to go to my auntie's house all the time, or why we had to go over here, but it's because they needed help, whether it was with their house or something with the family. Sometimes it was money. And sometimes it was about fixing their vehicle. Later on, as I went to East Central, I actually worked with Dr. Ketchum, and he had a big, itifabasa that was itifabasas are what we use in the nation, but he was very big on iikoi. And iikoi is kind of like a broken foot, a broken ankle. And what this means is, or the story behind this broken ankle is that this individual, I think it was an older lady, or this old mother, old grandmother, she was trying to attend to her crops in her household while all her family had passed away, some moved away. And this is like in a setting in the late 1700s, 1800s. And so with this individual, she breaks her ankle. And so she can't tend to her crops, she can't clean her house, or she can't do things that she needs to do to progress her life there. And it's understood that the people kind of helped serve. They moved her crops, picked her crops, helped her house, and did that as, not to saying that's your problem, but it's saying that we as a community take care of you as well. And it's like I said, a giving and a receiving. And so that kind of, as I talked to my grandpa, it's like that's also kind of biblical or spiritual too. It's also one of those kind of laws as well. He is very big on that aspect. And so I thought that as well whenever you see a lot of these warriors like go and just throw their lives on the line. And even today, for the men and women that put their lives on the line for freedom for America. And so that's where you start to see people serve. And so, evidently they call it service. And so they had just different tiers. And so whenever I saw, started doing a lot more research about why these people were playing and how the people actually fought in these battles, they were actually serving their people, whether they didn't want them to be a part of it or whether they wanted to have a better standpoint. And so And that's where I understand our warriors weren't just like these soldiers that were on their high horse.
Yeah.
They're also down working in the crop fields. They're also
servant leadership.
If not, they had more responsibilities too.
Wow.
And then they are able to, how would you say that, cleanse themselves as well. With actually, if they had to go to war, there was a way that they used to actually erase, or not erase, but actually work that's taking a life.
Yeah.
And so that's where we get that understanding. The women were considered as the givers of life, and then the men became the takers of life, not only in war and battle, but also in hunting and fishing. And so there was those roles, those were those things in the spirituality that's roots deeper than what we know right now. And so like PTSD, you have that today with a lot of people who are in poverty, people who are going to service, come to war, have nothing left. Well, back then, my grandpa would always tell me that they actually worked those things, those spiritualities, those mentalities. They talked about those things, and they actually moved, again, that negative energy into a positive state. And so that's where you see a lot of suicide and things of that nature, because a lot of people were helping each other. If someone was hurt in a way, then the community always took care of you. So that understanding of family, even though it wasn't your blood family, it was more your community. But today we kind of lost a lot of that stuff. We kind of strayed far from that stuff. And me as a first person, that strayed away from that too. So it's like, again, full circle to coming to realization, and probably even with maturity, that you understand where you serve and where I come from and where you come from. It's where what we do today that can impact some people tomorrow. So I definitely like seeing, how this correlates to stickball itself, to the warriorship, and to how the medicine that the Algonquins and to the Onondagas, that is about their cleanses, is not just a sport. There's a much more meaning that's, through our lens as indigenous people, that it pertains to a much deeper meaning. And then from a mainstream society, they're just playing ball.
Right.
So that it definitely, you had to understand how it's pertaining to the people and not to what's their actions from a far distance.
I'm glad you explained that, because when you observe the game, or so-called game, and when you're watching everyone play, it seems so hardcore. But it makes so much more sense as to why it might seem so aggressive in a really good way, because there's some spirituality behind it. There's that warrior feeling behind it. So thank you for sharing that with us so we can have that better perspective. My sisters and I and my niece and my daughter, we all took some lessons from a gentleman you probably know. And we took some stickball lessons, and the whole time we were just always focused on just technique. And, at some point you get to, you practice so much that we never got to past the technique part. But I would think once you played it so long and you're used to it and you're understanding how it all works, then you can start really bringing in that, hey, why are we doing this? And ancestors before us and centuries before were doing this to settle disputes, avoid war, also doing it for spiritual reasons. But I'm a terrible stickball player. I will say that. I will never be able to play you or your wife, but it's such a great experience.
I want to talk a bit about stickball of the old days, since it has changed some. I mean, people used to die in the games of yesteryear, so it has definitely morphed in some ways, but overall it's impressive that the game has stayed mostly true to the original form. So I'll paint a picture of stickball in years past. Before the game, the opposing tribes would try to come to the terms of the game, but if they couldn't come to terms, they would go to battle. So if and when all terms were agreed upon the night before, the tribes would perform similar rituals to their pre-war ceremonies, consisting of wearing regalia, dancing, singing, sacrifices, and calling to the spirits for help. The goal of the ceremonies also being to intimidate their rivals. Medicine men would bless the game, the sticks, and the players, giving them scratches that were said to make the blood flow freely for the game, which would lead to a win. The players would paint their bodies with charcoal and paint, and would also decorate their sticks. And they'd limit their diet as well in preparation and drink Spanish tea that was made up of the tree bark from red oak trees. And they'd work themselves up by not eating and sleeping so that they'd be full of rage by the time the game started. Each player would also place a wager to put up, such as wives, children, horses, knives, and more. Yep, you heard that right about the wives and children. I suppose if you hated your wife, or maybe you had a kid you didn't like so much, you could maybe hope that you lost, I guess. So the items bet upon would be awarded to the winners every quarter throughout the game. Anywhere from 100 to 1,000 men from opposing tribes came together, screaming their war cries and ready to play their best in hopes of winning for the tribe. And off they went, full force, no rules, and the spirits on their side. There were no referees. Trees or rocks were used as goals, and they were allowed to hit their opponents with their sticks. All players played for the duration of the game, which would last for days, usually from morning until sundown. Even in 1937, there's an account of an eyewitness named Frank Grawl, who was interviewed from Wewoka, Oklahoma, saying, "But when the first fellow got the ball, some player hit him over the head with a club, peeling the skin until it hung over his ear. The battle was so fierce that when the game was ended and one side had been chased from the ground, the pool was perfectly bloody." The pool he's talking about is where the women would pull the men from the game and place them in pools of water to try to get them to regain consciousness. He then said, "This was the last Indian ball game played in such a brutal manner, for the government took notice of such brutality and sent deputy marshals to the games to prevent such cruelty. At this game, I saw players bite one another." Wow.
So let's talk about the equipment. As mentioned earlier, there are 2 sticks, a ball, and a pole. What are the sticks made of?
So yeah, the sticks, they're actually made of hickory. That is a kind of the traditional resource. A long time ago, like the hundreds of years to the thousand, they're actually made of like smaller trees, like saplings.
Okay.
But today, with more man-made tools that can help process better, we're able to get bigger trees and cleaner wood. But even the style of the stick themselves from then to now is changed drastically. Even within the time from now and even to the 1930s to the 70s, the sticks themselves have changed in somewhat design because of resource shortage and don't know how to use certain tools. And so, almost incompetence, but yeah, pretty much that too, yeah.
Our ancestors are looking at us going, "Really? That's what you're using?"
Like a machine. Like, how do you tell someone to use a table saw who's never seen a table saw before?
Right. No, I think our ancestors are probably very proud of what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you. But definitely with that, you see 2 sticks and a ball. The sticks themselves, they are extensions of your hand, and the ball itself is close enough to the size of a golf ball. We'll say probably a quarter of an inch thicker than a golf ball itself. But the objective is to actually have the ball hit a post that's 4 by 4 by 12 foot tall. And you're able to hit this post 360 degrees. Mind you, that this post is actually mirrored by another post. And today we play on a football field. So think of it as at the 5-yard line or goal line to the other goal line. And we played the whole field, not just the cutoff marks by marking, but the whole field. That's
got to be exhausting.
Yes. And we played 30 on 30. But, I'm sorry, back to the sticks, though. The sticks themselves, again, they're made out of hickory. And that's traditionally the resource that was found and used. Just because whenever it's green, it's able to be flexible. Actually, all wood is flexible whenever it's freshly cut. Because it has life still in it. There's that moisture. There's that ability to sculpt and craft it. And so other trees or other hardwoods were used as well. Ash, oak, and then recently I'm starting to see some made out of bodark. You can use some other stuff that grows near the waterways that actually produce more like moisture-bearing woods that actually would make it more flexible because it's saturated with that. And if you apply the heat, you can actually bend it.
What do you think they were using in Mississippi back in the day?
So back in the day, they were using stone tools. You can actually use a stone blade to actually, what they call it, compression. Instead of like here, you have axes, you're actually cutting. And so to actually cut down a tree, you actually use a stone that actually is not a fine point, but it's got its heaviness. It actually compresses and chews away, like a beaver almost, chews away that type of tree stalk. And to actually split it, you would actually find a different, either shell or even a finer blade that actually like wedge through. And then once you start to wedge through, if you're able to have leverage, you can actually split a tree in half. I do it all the time with metal tools. And so it's funny how like you see the makeup of like natural things. It's all about splitting. And so moving things, twisting things, and splitting things, you're able to make these things move naturally. So you would have stone tools, even some shell, and wooden mallets or limbs. All those things can help shave down and actually bend, or shave down to a state where you can bend these trees to actually make those bigger sticks then. And today, where you versus metal is more refined and it can be sharper. You can actually cut through, but their knowledge of falling grain is where we kind of fall off today. And so whenever you're able to split, that's what I was talking about splitting, you actually follow those links, the rings. Yeah. So whenever you split one in half, you can actually pull it apart. And if you follow some of those rings, you can actually find it and you can move with it. You can actually bend the stick with it. This makes it show.
Wow, interesting.
It's probably about a decade of knowledge trying to throw it all within a couple hours.
I know, right? Well, especially like you didn't just learn from YouTube; you also learned from your family, who have been doing it for a long time too.
I just told this is how you do it. This is why I never understood the like mechanics nor the specifics, and so until I got older and asking questions, YouTubing and Googling and just like, what does that mean? And then there's people woodworkers that have all this knowledge from a long time ago, just don't apply it into this format of stick making.
Well, and can you imagine what people were doing before, say, YouTube or whatever, and there was an even narrower amount of people making them just because it probably stayed in their little group, just making it there, and that was it. Yeah,
like we're making it over here, but I don't know what you're making over there.
Yeah, totally.
So the sticks are made out of hickory, bent by using steam. Today, they're probably bent by steam, or some would use probably heats over an open fire like our ancestors did, or you can even do it in a like heat gun. I started recently doing what our ancestors did, which was actually having it over an open fire and dousing it with oil.
Really?
This helps it kind of protect it some from charring as much, but also it's a lot faster than steam because it helps it set as well. Mm-hmm. But that's where we're able to bend the stick itself and shave it, or use a blade to actually chip away into a handle form. And then what the ancients would have done was actually compressed, or what they call bone. And so what that means is that you get an antler or an animal, a femur or some big animal, and you actually would compress it, or a stone. You can get a stone. And then you would actually rub that onto the wood itself, and there the wood actually compresses.
Well, have you ever thought about like doing it the old way? Trying one time to do it? It would probably take like 5 years to make a stick, but
probably not. But I do. I
need a femur, and
I do want to do that, like legit stone tools.
Be awesome.
The thing is, though, you have to make those tools too,
right?
So I was like, I don't know that knowledge. Like, I don't know. Do I just find a rock that I find on the side of the road? Yeah. Because there's different rocks for different things. And so like granite, granite's pretty hard, but the stone they use in ceremonial axes were like greenstone. You can't find greenstone unless you're talking about jade. But jade's not as sturdy or heavy duty like this greenstone that they found in the mountain area. And that's where you get that whole thing of like ancient aliens, like how they cut this stuff.
How'd they do that? Yeah. Stonehenge and all that. Right? We'll find you working on it like for 20 years, your beard will all be grown out and your hair. Why did I ever start this project?
That's my own independent study there.
Exactly. And so the end of the stick is like a basket or webbing or something, right?
Yes. So
to hold the ball.
It's kind of like a hoop or so it's actually one long stick, and then you actually make a kind of like a question mark. Okay. But it closes. Mm-hmm. And so whenever it closes, you can actually start to render or fade before it bends. And once it bends, you actually meet two ends together. So you have a nice teardrop-looking cup. Okay. Some people call it a basket. Some people call it a cup. It's different for everyone else. But for me, I like using the term cup. Okay. And so the cup itself, just because it's got that, teardrop look, you can actually flare it. You can actually make it open up like a flower. And so the flare, it actually helps with picking up the ball off the ground and catching it midair. Then within inside the webbing itself, we don't necessarily do the ancients way of webbing it anymore. We just kind of do a simple cross.
Okay.
There's one direct strand that goes through a hole through the stick or through the cup. And what they would do is they would actually kind of grind it with a stone or with a shell. And then some say that they would actually put a ash or a coal on it to actually singe off the ruptured drilling. In which I kind of still do the same thing today, where I can pilot a hole, but I also just poke a hot nail, a hot piece of metal, just through it. So this doesn't reflect on splitting even more. It's actually just burnt off. It makes sense to me, but I don't know if it really tells. But it looks good too.
Yeah.
And you can always smell the smoke from it too, even when it's done.
But that's kind of cool though.
It is. Yeah. So you have one hole at the very top, and then you have two holes on each side, which is pretty symmetrical. Looks like a plus sign or a cross.
Yeah.
And we actually wrap the leather or whatever kind of cordage you're using rounds and outside the cup, and then you actually pull the one that's on the very top over the one that's going across, and you tie that off at the base of the cup area where it met each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you do that, then you kind of halfway done the wrapping of the one that goes from side to side, and you use that leather to actually wrap rounds to actually give it a second layer on the one that's going across.
Yeah.
You also bind the one that's going up and down across it, so you actually see this, cross cup. And so this actually helps us pick up the ball, because that top piece of leather or strand, whatever it is you're using, is at an angle. So when the angle catches the ball, it's able to not directly put all the weight into one area like a basket.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually to deflect pressure into the seats of the cup, kind of like across. But with us having two sticks, it actually caught and then supported by the other one. So it's like, two hands. You have better control whenever you have two hands to catch something.
Yes.
And so the other cup is the mirror image. It has the same type of webbing, but the size may be different.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they say different sizes is because some will understand that the old story that actually from Mark's dad, I remember hearing the story from Olin Williams, was saying that, the bigger stick was considered as the father and the little stick was considered as the mother.
Really?
And the ball is considered as the baby. And so whenever the ball is scooped up, the mother will always be there to pick up the baby, the child.
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever, in like throwing motion, whenever the ball is ready, the father cup or father stick will be able to progress it on or transition it on. And
that's beautiful.
And as it's in this, motion, whenever the father stick's about to, throw it, it's also showing that the mother stick is always going to protect the baby or the ball itself for however long time needed.
Yeah.
And so it's a family unit type of deal to where you have both of them together. So as kids, you understand that a lot more than one stick.
Yeah.
That's just one variation. I may have not told it verbatim what Olin said, but that's kind of how I feel. I understand.
I like that.
And I even asked Olin before. I was like, "Hey, how's that go?" And I told him like just what I just kind of told you. He's like, "That's a good version of it." I was like, "Wow,
it'll do."
I know. I was like,
pretty
"Okay."
Good. I like that. That's actually very lovely.
And then the ball itself, they used to use a hickory nut or a clay ball, and sometimes a stone. And then if it's a small stone, they'll actually wrap other types of fabric.
I was going to say, getting hit in the head with one of those would hurt.
It'll hurt. It does hurt too. They would use something to kind of give it a weight. And sometimes the weight varied depending on the maker. And this is what I've told some of my staff is that, from what we learned throughout these past decade and a half is that they use different materials for a holistic standpoint. So like they actually observe and see how things in nature moved around. And so like there's a story about a person actually capturing a flea and then putting that flea inside this core of this ball and then stitch it like, a normal baseball or kind of like a baseball because it's what they used to look like a long time ago.
Right.
Like a baseball, it's like material wrapped around this core and stitched. Went until later on, around after European contact, that they actually started playing with a woven ball that looked symbolic or similar to like how the basket is woven.
Mm.
It lasted a lot longer, and they used to actually have these long tails to actually put on the end of them, so whenever they saw it, they can actually see where it went. But then today, since we don't play like outside normally in wild terrain, it's more of in a platform that's more like sport, and we play at night now. And then we have lights like Friday night lights, field lights. To see something that's reflective, we use like highlight orange paint. So we actually paint the ball today, just so that you can see it more vibrant, not just for the players, but also for the people in the stands.
Yeah. Because
if you don't have a trained eye for it, then you'll miss it.
Oh, totally. It's so small.
Definitely.
And how small is it, typically, you said?
Like I said, it's probably close to a quarter of an inch thicker than a golf ball.
Okay.
So in diameter size. So an eighth of an inch on each area of the ball.
And so you talked earlier about the poles and that they're on either end of the field, and players use their sticks to pick up the ball and then they try to throw it at the pole, right?
Yes. So the pole today is a 4x4 post, so 4 inches by 4 inches on all sides and 12 foot tall. The objective is to actually have that ball hit that post. If you're talking about the time when the ancients played in the Stickball time, it was more of like a post and lintel type of deal, where they would find these skinny trees and they would actually bind them together until it makes a big like hockey goal. But it was like 15 foot to 20 foot tall, and it was binded at the top. And so it's like a window, like a gate almost. And you had to have that ball thrown in that gate.
Okay, yeah.
So mind you, this is a lot easier goal, a lot easier thing to do. And you either had the ball thrown in there or you had the ball in the sticks and you ran through that gate.
Okay.
It's a lot easier compared to this 4x4 post today. But then, mind you, you had hundreds of thousands of people playing back then.
True.
And then they used to hit each other with the sticks and then wrestle, kind of like wrestle or fought on the field. So to make you lose possession of the ball. Today, we don't do all that. Today, what we do is that we still tackle. We still do a little bit of wrapping up. But making this a miniature version of what our ancestors done, we amped up the skill to actually have that ball hit the post.
Gotcha.
And so the actual sound of hitting that is called nafti. And so it's just kind of like a, kind of thing. And so we made the poles today to sound hollow, just so that whenever it hits it, you can hear that.
Okay.
Because some people will say, "Oh, he hit it," and it just like barely missed the millimeter.
Yeah.
And some people
didn't hear the nafti.
You didn't hear it. Yeah. It's kind of like your current bell, like when the hockey's hit.
Yeah.
And the siren goes off or the bell goes off. Kind of the same aspect.
And so when they do hit the pole, there's points that are made, right?
Yes. So after each contact the ball to the pole, it is 1 point, and only 1 point. And then some people can actually have the ball in the sticks while the player has possession of the sticks and actually tap the pole.
Okay.
And that will actually be a point too. But today, that's kind of harder to do because a lot more people are ready for it. Just because once you have possession and you're trying to get into your defense's territory, you're immediately the one to be tackled. So it's best to actually shoot it.
Right.
Yeah, there's strategic plans that you can actually set your defense and offense up to actually move around, to actually either shoot it closely or tap it. Today, it's a lot harder to tap it because you have to hit the post, make it noticeable that you hit the post with the sticks and the ball. And then you still have to keep possession of the ball after you had tapped it for over 2 or 3 seconds.
There's so much skill involved in this game. I mean, I think that people that are really into sports, like, let's say you're a football player or you love watching football or whatever, go try to play this game, or if you're a lacrosse player, even better. I mean, obviously they can already. Yeah. Have you played lacrosse players before?
I have not. Well,
I've just always wondered if they have, they walk into it a little more easier than some people would.
Actually, they do because they grasp the concept. We actually did have some lacrosse players come. I think when I was still in high school, they were just stopping by and they was like, "What are y'all doing?" And it was like towards the end of the day, it was getting close to sundown, and we were playing them, and they were so used to using one stick that they could cradle. That's what they call it, cradling. They actually cradle a ball.
They do this thing.
Yeah, a whole lot better than we could. But the thing is that whenever they threw it, they were so used to swinging it, and they actually would just be over. They actually shoot over the post.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone actually scooted far away. And actually when they threw it, because it's a lot lighter ball, it's a lot shorter stick.
Yeah.
And so I actually seen one lacrosse player actually throw it like from half court or halfway, wherever that was, and actually hit the post. And it was like barely dark. It's like, that was just luck. But they still had, the ability to fling it. Other than that, their control of like hitting each other with the stick, we had to kind of take that away from them because you couldn't check nobody.
Yeah.
And then we had to apply the actual physicalness of actual tackling. So if you had the ball, you were to be tackled. And in lacrosse, you can't tackle.
Mm-hmm.
You can throw a shoulder or whatever, but you can't actually wrap somebody up.
Yeah.
So that's where we kind of dominated a little bit on our little field when we were in high school, because they weren't ready for being physical contact without any padding on.
I wonder if they walked away going, that's a lot harder of a game than what we play, even though lacrosse is not easy, but
yeah,
it's crazy. So do you play for points or for time?
Today we play for time. Well, actually, points too.
So whoever gets the most points wins, right?
Yes, so whenever you have the most points wins. Today we actually put a time restriction on there. It's 4 15-minute quarters.
Okay.
A 2-minute break between like the first and second quarter and third and fourth quarter, and a 5-minute halftime.
I didn't realize it was that quick, even though, I mean, I'm sure you're dead by the end of it, how grueling it is, but...
It's a lot faster, definitely when you're playing, but then whenever you're a spectator watching, like, how long do they keep going? The thing is, though, to have a good roster of people to actually supplement you while you're going in and out. Because there's no official, like, go in or go out. You call it as you see it. And some players will, like, raise their sticks up to actually go off the field, and someone immediately comes and replaces them.
That would be after like 3 minutes.
Yeah. And it definitely sucks when you don't have no one to replace you, too. And I've also played in those games, too, where it's like, I'm just watch this ball go by and see who gets it. There's also points, too. So, like, today in the World Series of Stickball, they do actually have a mercy rule, which they started implementing that probably since Oklahoma Choctaw started playing, because we didn't have a lot of skilled people. We had a lot of people that were skilled in tackling.
Yeah.
But not a lot of people skilled in picking and catching up the ball.
The Mississippi Choctaw have been doing it a lot longer, right?
Yes, a lot more. We're all dormant, definitely, within this game of stickball. They were coming to rise around officially and on this bigger platform in the 70s. But for us as Oklahoma Choctaws, we didn't get a lot of speed until the 90, I would say 5 or 4. Around the same time, the 70s, when Mississippi players were actually doing this tournament style, they were having a lot more people involved. For us in Oklahoma, we only did it as an exhibition, as a way of saying, it's what we do, is what this, anyone come play, it's a learning moment.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really a competition.
Cool.
It was more of like a here to get people involved.
Yeah.
This is like our little step to do before we get to that level. And they were doing that, when I say they, I mean my grandparents, they were doing that in Tuskahoma during Labor Day Festival. And it wasn't until, I think, when I remember, till the 90s that we still had it, and we had some Mississippi people come and they played, and they would come here, and a lot earlier than the recent 2000s time. And so our Chickasaw relatives, they played as well, but they would play with us more so. And then when their festivals started getting bigger and bigger, they started hosting their own too, exhibitions, and then they were just starting out. Well, when I remember around 2000, that they were actually kind of trying to unify more of a Chickasaw Toli or Chickasaw, and they always had a good outing during the festival times. But whenever on their festival times, whenever they came to us, we didn't really have hardly any of them. We probably had about 10 or so that would show up, and just because they loved to play. But again, sticks were very scarce. There were some makers that were there in Chickasaw country as well, but some we actually learned from Seminole style. So we actually have a collaboration or a mixture of Seminole style thick handles for actually hitting, and then some we actually would see like our Choctaw style, which is more a little slender, a lot lighter, and some actually fuse the two together to actually make a Chick-Chock or a Seminole style.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd never heard of that. That's cool.
Yeah, so that was...
Chick-Chock.
And the webbing then used to be more of a cross, actual X's or diamonds. And it makes sense to if that was to be Choctaw, but it wasn't. It was actually Seminole or a Creek. But, all of us being a relatable people from the southeastern area, that we all played this type of stickball game. And so it was just different rules for different hosts.
Yeah. Well, and even the Cherokee they have a net at the top of theirs, right?
Yes, they have kind of
And some other tribes too, maybe.
they have like a big pocket, big pocket in the eastern band, and then in Oklahoma, they still play like kind of like two stick, like an east and west game here. And so you got 3 or 4 different categories, and I can't go into detail because that's their tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how they acknowledge some of those things as well. So yeah, in the Southeastern tribes, the differences. The ball was a little bit smaller. The goals kind of sit similar, like we talked about the hockey goal. To run with it within our recent years when we play, this roster this time, and so when they started adding that mercy rule, you go to like if you don't make a point within the time frame that the other opposing team has made 9, then you're done.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't matter if you're first or second quarter. But if you happen to make a point before the first half within the time to make 9 points or 8 points, then you stay in the game.
Okay.
And then it's towards the third quarter. If you are trailing by 10 points, then you play till the end of that third quarter. But if they so happen to tack on like 10 points within the third quarter, you're still taking it because they don't stop it during the quarter. They stop it at the end of quarters.
Okay, yeah.
So there is some mercy rules. There is some regulations in the timing and the movement of today's game. When we talk about timing, time doesn't stop. And so today in the World Series, you have close to 8 to 10 refs per game. And so if a ball goes out in this parameter of the football field, then a ball is immediately thrown in where it went out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes the game more like intuitive. It makes it more action, and it doesn't stop. I mean, if a person is playing and they happen to get severely hurt where they can't get themselves off the field, then they'll stop the game. And I kind of assess them, get EMS over there to kind of look at them, and if they have to take them, they pick them up and wheel them off the field, and they start playing again.
Mm-hmm.
If a person's hurt where they're laying on the ground and they can get up somewhat, some people will just go there, help them pick them up and move off the field, and they start playing again. So unless it's something severe like that, then they'll stop time. But if it's not severe, like if you just twisted your ankle pretty bad and you're just hobbling off, the game's still going. You can actually get hit while you're trying to hobble off.
So brutal.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, some people are not going to move around you. Like if you're lightly hurt,
oh boy,
if you're able to walk off, then you're able to get hit too while you're walking off as well.
Gotta be tough
as a bystander. So,
wow, that's nuts, and I love it though. Let us not also forget the power of the drum, right? So tell us more about that.
So the drum is actually kind of a rendition. Today, the Mississippi drum is kind of a rendition of the British kind of snare drum, but it still plays an impact of the years before that. It resembles kind of the heartbeat of the game, and some people can correlate it to the heartbeat of the Choctaw people. It's a 1 2 1 1 2 1 1 2 1 hit sequence where you can actually hear the drummer actually imply it, and as it gets faster, the legend is to believe that it can control the ball. So whenever the game is being played, some people consider as elikchi, or what we call doctors, or some people would say like medicine men, would actually be the bearers of this tune, but also the bearers of medicine that's on the field as well. And it implies that the old tradition plays in that time area, and some people still have that instant of the understanding. In today's society, Olin Williams talks about how that heartbeat is relatable to every type of person, and it's literally the hitting of the drum. It does resemble that, like the fast pacedness of do 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 do, but it gets a little faster. It goes do 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 do, and like it goes over and over and over again.
So it's playing through the whole game.
Yeah, it's playing through the whole game. And Olin, he says this because he said it resembles us as babies as we're in the womb. As close as that we're still within the womb of the mother, we hear her heart, whether she's calm or whether she's in a situation where it's fast paced, or if she's frantic, or if it's exciting, or if it's fearful, or if it's celebration, you hear all those reactions within that heartbeat. So we're familiar with that.
Wow.
And that's what he correlates that to. Definitely when we're on that field, it feels like we're home again, or it feels like where we were born from. And so when we talk about the matrilineal society, and that's where the big impact of our, being as Choctaw people comes from. Even some legends resemble that the earth is kind of the mother itself. Naniwaya in Choctaw means leaning hill, but sometimes some people refer to Naniwaya as Mother Mound. Mm-hmm. And so this mound, as the legend says, or one of the legends says, is that we were actually born from this mound itself into the existence of the world. And so here we see this correlation between females as mothers, as aunties, as life givers into the men and women that are now known as the Choctaw people. And so it even plays in part of our language too. I like saying this part because it's still so fascinating to me that whenever you talk about my mother or my grandmother, they actually begin with the word sa. And mind you, sa is actually something that belongs to you, like a part of you. Mm. So I'll say like your hand is what we call sabak, because it's attached to you.
Yeah.
Sahanali is like my leg. Sa'i is my feet, my foot, or my feet. Sanishkin is my eyes. All the sa is upsilon. It's like it's something that's a part of me, or even within me, like my spirit, or my heart, or my thoughts, or my emotions. It derives from me, or to me. Then, like if it's ownership, like my water or my dog, you would hear ah. So depending if it's followed by a vowel or consonant. That's possession. Like it's my car, encore, or you'd say amofi, my dog. Those are objects or other things that's not pertaining to my body or my feelings. But mother though, like Inky's father, but you say Anki is A-K-I. Anki's my father. And when I say Sashki, that's my mother. And it just shows that I was born from her. Yeah. Like I'm actually an extension of her, and my grandmother that was her mother she's an extension of her. That's why we say Sapokne. That's where that correlation of that language goes to. So when we talk about some of these legends about coming from the earth or coming from the ground itself, you hear that, you can relate that to that creation of being. And so whenever Olin would tell that story about the mother's heartbeat, we already all have that understanding. We feel that because we are all born, obviously. And so it's already pre-programmed into us, or it's already destined for us to hear it. It's just whether we hear it again as we're more matured. It's just like you come to the beginning stages before you actually see the sun. That's where whenever we play the game, when you hear those drums, it reminds you of peace. It reminds you of clarity. It kind of reminds you of the things before we hear all these other concepts of man, where stress or whatever that you see today, that's you have so many things going on. But whenever you get that game set and you hear those drums, there's nothing out there but the ball, and then your reaction, your moves towards to being proactive on the field, and your kind of reflection. Not a lot of thought goes into it. It's more about whether I'm going to move or I'm not going to move.
And I like how when you were talking about that, you were looking around the room as if you were on the field right then, kind of looking towards the pole, looking at the players. Wow. What an interesting thing about the drum and what it actually means. That opens up a whole new world to me about what I've always thought about the drum itself. So when it comes to the person who plays the drum, who does that?
So today, there are people are chosen, I guess, or if some people have an interest, they'll find a drummer, and it's kind of up to that drummer's discretion whether they allow them to actually borrow their drum or have them make their own drum so they can actually get to that point. And usually, it was only men that carried the drum. But like everything, we transition. We have to. And so within the last, I think, was it 2018 or 2017, where they actually had the first female drummer actually from Mississippi come out, and she was a daughter of one of the drummers, because I guess he didn't have a son, or none of his sons were there to actually carry it on, so his daughter had a genuine interest and actually carried it. And so now we have a few more females that are actually drumming, and so it's not like those old laws of like women can't be in the center of this because of something of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely, like even war dances or war enactments or like the game of stickball in general actually is only male. But for us as Choctaw people, I wouldn't say that we're not just progressive, but we're just saying that they are also equal too. And so that's where, if not better than or more aggressive than some of the men too, which is pretty true to see some of the women play.
Choctaw Hoyos.
Yeah, Choctaw Hoyos. And so it just makes me understand a little bit more that we're always progressing to actually kind of help, not just to keep it going, but actually to, follow that duty for us as people, as Choctaw people, to kind of don't ever let it go away.
Yeah.
And so definitely if they're chosen, or if a person that goes to the drummer, and like I said, they make their own drum. Some people buy their own drum. Like some people sell it, and some people try to drum, and some can do that, and some do that. It's just not a particular role nowadays like there used to be. Mm-hmm. But a long time ago, the drummer could have been actually one of those lichis or medicine people that actually carried along control of the heartbeat and whatever the holistic is from nature to what's on the field. Well, today we kind of tell our own narrative with that, and not to keep it as a negative connotation, but definitely our own perspective. And so with that, that's pretty much what I see as for the drum itself.
Yeah. And so the drum is pounding, the players are fired up and ready to go, and then what happens next?
Then you actually hear, depends, if they are walking into the field, you can hear the drums. Well, actually, in the World Series, you would actually have these set in different locations, because one of the things you cannot, I guess, experience that you cannot recreate unless it's there again is the drums. The people are led by the drums onto the arena or the field. Before you even hear people or see people, you'll hear the drums, and they're going on that, and like it's magnified like 10 times. It's like someone has an amp, but there's no amp out there. It's just them hitting the drums, playing the drums.
Cool.
And then as they get closer, you can start to hear it. You can start to hear the clacks of the sticks. The warrior, or as the players, they're getting closer, they start to, it's all about vocables. Whenever you connect the sounds into the actions of what they're about to do, it just brings all of it together. And so as they begin to get closer to the arena, you can start to hear some of what they call the saha, which is kind of like your cry or your shouts. So people would say war cry, but it's your yell. And so once they actually start to get to a part where they start to see each other, they start to do that, kind of like an intimidation type of deal. And then you hear them just getting louder and louder and louder, and they'll actually make a walk around the posts themselves, the goal posts, as they kind of look at each other, and they can either acknowledge each other or ignore each other. And they'll walk around each individual's pole, and then they'll meet back into the center like a big snake.
Right.
And then they'll kind of do a face-off where they're matched up 30 on 30, and all those who are excessive, they actually go to the sidelines, and then that's when they kind of find their respectable places of zones to play. And then you can start to see the refs come in with the ball and actually throw it up, and you would have a jump ball just like basketball. So
the ref gets you started, and talk about the refs a little bit. What's their role in all of this madness that's going on out there?
So the refs, they actually there's actually in the World Series of Stickball, there's actually a booklet of rules and regulations and things that they have to enforce that's on the field. And so things like early hit, late hit, it's within their discretion. Like if they are hit too early or hit too late, then they can issue an infraction. So the infraction, it depends on how severe it is. It could be a quarter that player sits out, or it could be a half that player sits out. And so they enforce those things, make sure that the game is being played within good reason, that everyone's following the rules. If the ball goes out of bounds, then the refs are able to, because they'll have probably a handful of balls with them, then they're able to actually return or throw up another ball into the area where it went out of bounds. So that's kind of like it's mostly the refs are doing, kind of keeping the peace, making sure that it's clean, it's safe, that it doesn't stop, and that it continues to keep playing. And I think there are some instances where they can actually make calls, like if there's intentional swinging of sticks or fights, then they can actually pull them people out and say you're done with the tournament, like, or you're done with the game, or you're done with the tournament. Depends on what their rules are. And so that's pretty much the role. And and then calling the points. And so there's actually refs that watch the center field area. There's refs that watch the outer field, and then there are refs that actually watch just the pole itself. So if a team is actually threatening to actually score, and if they shoot, and like we were talking about before, if it doesn't really hit that pole, then they rely on the sound, or if it's really close of how they saw or lined up with it, if it nicked it, then they actually get that judgment. They actually can make that call to say that was a clean hit or that was a point. Yeah. And so whatever the refs say for that point, they have to come to a quick understanding. And like, mind you, this is like seconds. This is not discussions like you would see, like a pause and everyone play the replay.
Commercial break.
There's no instant replay. It's all about that initial person's or that ref's call. So sometimes some refs will actually see it, and if it hits, they'll pull the hand up and be like, it's a point. But then if another ref or two saw it, they can actually wave it off and be like, no, it wasn't. And then they're like, radio, was it? Just kind of confirm. It's like, it wasn't. It's like, okay. And then they just kind of go on and re-jump and re-throw the ball up and jump play again. Or if it was a point, then they count it and then they take it back to the center area. And so after a point is made, after each point that is made, it comes back to the center area and the ball's thrown up like a jump ball, like basketball. Yeah. So. Wow.
Well, and I'm sure you mentioned sometimes they have to break up a fight or two. Tell me how brutal the actual game gets out there, because I've seen so many pictures of some gruesome things going on.
It depends. It depends on how people play. If people are definitely trying to hurt someone, then they'll, either hurt themselves severely or hurt someone else severely. Some of the things that are common is like, I'm trying to say this nicely. Trying to think of things that you would see common is like, a hurt foot or a broken ankle or broken wrist. There's concussions. There is torn shirts. There are gashes across the face, on top of the skull. There's, there's a variety of things. It depends on where they hit and where they land, pretty much. There's torn ligaments. There's torn ACLs, depending on how fast they were going, and depends on how people were wrapped up or like tackled and wrapped and how they landed. Because some people can actually break their shoulder, some people can actually break their leg or hurt their knee pretty bad. Even like in the elbow area is almost everything, because you're not wearing any protective gear, and so you're solely just being on yourself. Some people play optional with shoes on, or with they'll probably take their feet up and play barefoot, and some people just play barefoot.
It feels like it should be all or nothing. I'll wear shoes or you don't.
Well, it's up to the player's discretion. And the only thing that you can't do is like
I love that, though. It's free for all. You do what you need to do.
I was going to say, it depends on, the player's discretion. If they want to wear shoes or not, it's up to them. And then really all that's required of them is to actually wear the jersey with the team and the number, and just shorts or whatever. It doesn't mean you have to wear like gym shorts. There's some people that wore compression shorts, or like undies, and they're played out there.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Nice.
And like the younger generations today, they're actually starting to, they don't play like bare, but they are starting to kind of show off more of their body. Like they actually, it's kind of weird, because it's like, I grew up in a generation where clothes were baggy, but today it's now about, someone will actually tie their shirt up above their abdomen area and just show off the abs. And like, mostly it's the younger ones that are in fit, not none of the younger ones that are big.
I'd be trying to protect my skin as much as possible.
Right.
Plus, I really don't want to show any of that right now. Have you had any injuries yourself?
Yeah, so my hand right here.
Oh, you got a jankety finger.
I went to tackle somebody, and my hand kind of dug into their shoulder.
Yeah.
And I guess when it dug into the shoulder, it kind of jammed it, and then when I pulled to bring them down, it ripped their shirt off, and I guess it got mangled in that shirt, and I fell on it too. So I guess all one motion. And I thought I was just bruised, but evidently I kind of knocked it out of place.
Yeah.
And so the actual bone was supposed to be like in here,
right,
in this area, but I actually shifted it up. And then when I shifted it up, I thought it was just a bruise. I mean, like a jammed finger, because I had jammed fingers before. And so it never went back. Like it fused. So the bottom of the side of the bone is now where the bottom of the bone should be.
Oh,
where the cartilage
my
is
Lord. But the best part is you got the shirt.
Yeah, I got the shirt.
Way to go.
Other than that, I really haven't had any injuries like that. I never had a concussion. I just twisted my ankle maybe once or twice. And all I got was like cuts on the eye and on the face. I had the stick come across my face before. I've been hit. Those have come from hits from the sticks. Mm-hmm. And then...
Been hit by the ball?
Oh, yeah, I've been hit by the ball. Actually, the ball, from me to you, I had someone actually throw the ball, and I'm a lot taller than they were.
Yeah.
And so when the ball let go, it actually hit my cheek, but also in its trajectory, it actually went up into my eye. And so it actually, this kind of cushioned some of the blow, but it still went into my eye. And my eye was kind of like, it was only deadened for like 5 seconds. But it was the longest 5 seconds of my life.
Oh, I bet.
I'll move my eye up and down, and I can feel like my eyelid go up and down, but there's nothing, like it's all black.
Oh, man.
And I was like, I think I'm gonna have to go to the hospital. And like I just kind of closed both my eyes and I kind of opened it up, and it wasn't coming out, or it wasn't working. And I was just kind of frantic, and all of a sudden I could start seeing again out of this eye. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm good, I think,
Keep playing.
Or I think it was close to the end of that game, but still, it's pretty crazy.
What's it like out there to play? I mean, I would think that you're just constantly seeing sticks, people, where's the ball, where am I?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely like, I don't know. Whenever you see the jump ball go up, that's where you start to see, a lot of your adrenaline's going and you're ready. Mm-hmm. And if you're playing, on your side, say like, I remember used to playing shooter a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I was an offensive player before the last probably 6-7 years ago when I started getting out of shape and I started playing defense just because I don't have to run as much.
Uh-huh.
But I remember seeing that happen and like just getting so anxious to actually get ready to go play. And it's just so much like you're waiting to actually see where the ball goes.
Right.
And sometimes you'll see people get the ball that's going to go towards your way, but then they just get smashed. And it's like, oh, well, whoever gets the ball next. And then like it's someone that's going to send it the other way, but then they get tackled and the ball pops out again. So it's like, you're kind of like that dog that's like, which way are you going, and it's not until someone, actually gets it and throws it. And you can see partially from afar, depending on if you have good vision, you can see someone winding the ball or like flicking it out. And so within the 5 foot distance from where they're letting go, you can start to see that ball travel high in the sky. Mm. And so from there, it's like you have to understand trajectory a bit to see where it's going to end out. And so once it starts gliding or getting higher and higher and it starts to descend, then you start making your move like, it's over there. Do I go over there?
Yeah.
Or do I wait for the backside? Or then you start seeing the defense kind of arm up, get ready, position themselves. And then again, this all happened within like milliseconds, mm-hmm. Or within seconds, literally seconds.
I bet.
That people are reacting, getting to their areas, to zone, to format, to either to block you out, to tackle you. And whether you're offense, you set yourself up where you're going to be like, am I going to make it to where I keep the ball down here? Or am I going to try to catch it and shoot it? It's all about either being proactive or reactive to what's going to happen. And so it's like like you herd like sheep or cows real quickly, and it's like everyone kind of fits. So as the ball is shot out, everyone's like moving around and adapting. And once they wait patiently within the next 2 seconds or second, as it drops, then someone either catches it, sends it back, or someone hits the stick, or who was going to catch it, or someone knocks the ball down straight to the ground, and then it's all like a race wherever the shooters are hurrying up to try to go pick it up, to actually lob it, so to drop it over to someone who's on the backside to actually catch it and shoot it, or whether they're trying to shoot it themselves to make it go out of bounds so it goes over there. It's all about, from a shooter perspective, it's all about lobbing it and getting to the next shooter. Mm-hmm. Because if you're the first one to pick it up, you're most of the time you're being tailed.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're the first one to go get the
Run
ball,
away.
it's mostly like you're the one that's getting hit first. And
Yeah.
a lot of us know that we're getting hit first. And so it's about the second person
Get
who
rid
gets
of
it. Yeah. And it's all about the second person who's trying to shoot it. So that's it. If you lob it successfully, then it's a good setup to actually get a point off. But if you don't and you shank it, then you also you just kind of screwed the whole side because the whole format's up because everyone's reactive to that. And again, you're playing a defense, usually, so it's 30 on 30, and some people will put 12 on the defensive side. Some people will put 8s on the offensive side, and some people will actually have people in the center that plays both sides, and only a small core, like 6 of people will actually play just dead center.
Yeah.
Some will actually, 2 will go to the defensive side to beef it up to actually be 14, and some will actually move it on if the possession is close to the offensive side to actually beef it up to actually be 10. So you have to shift, your numbers around, just so that you can be, a good contender or at least threatening to actually make a score. So it's all about reaction and proactive and reaction. Whether you want to place yourself and be patient to wait on it for you to come, or if you're just going to be in the mess of it and you're just going to help react to tear it up or to, have no formality of it. In which there's not much that you can, like when people talk about football plays, this center, this guard, and this tackle are going to pull and go this way. That is your formality. For stickball, we have the goalie and this area and this area. This is their zones. When we say zones, that means within the 10 to 15 foot radius or circumference or yards of circumference, that is your responsibility. And if it goes outside your area, you shift a different way to be supportive to whoever zones that way.
Yeah. And
so it's all revolving. You just don't stand in one area forever. I mean, you do to be patient to where you read where it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so all that's happening within seconds, though. It's happening within, the seconds that you're going there. And so if you're not quick enough to actually get to where the ball's at, then you need to be quick enough to where the ball's going to be. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't be just me having to be, I need to be on the other side. It's more did I make a good look for someone that's going to be on the other side so they know where it need to be? And so
I don't think I could think that fast.
It's all about, again, it's also about experience too.
Yeah.
Because if you're not really experienced in being that fast pacedness, then you'll just look like, a lost puppy out there.
Right.
Just where did I go?
And you talk about experience. How many years have you been playing?
I've been playing, so I started playing with the adults when I was 12.
Wow.
And I was a big kid. So I was.
No way.
Yeah. I don't think I was that big, but to the common man then, I think I was pretty...
Especially to the Choctaw, because we're not usually tall people.
No, yeah.
Where'd you get that?
My mom, actually. My mom, her dad is actually the taller individual.
Okay.
So me, my brother, and my sister, we all got his height. So
yeah.
I'm probably... I think I might be the tallest, or I might be the shortest of my siblings. So, they're only just a centimeter or a hair taller than I am, though.
Yeah, yeah. So you're all tall. You're just...
Yeah, we're all tall. And we're all big, too. Which is funny, but it's true. I used to be the big brother, but then I became the small brother.
Yeah, you can't beat up on him anymore. How many siblings do you have?
Just 2. I have a brother and sister.
And then are you all Choctaw?
Yeah, majority I'm all Choctaw. Like I said, there's my nan, my grandma on my mom's side, her family have Choctaw in them. And
that's right. Okay.
Then on my dad's side, we're majority Choctaw, but there's some of that, I think it might be Dutch or French, and from descendant from a long time ago, but it's barely there,
Yeah.
But other than that, it's for the most part mostly native. So
yeah.
Documented wise, it's over half, or not that half, but 70 or 60%.
Mm-hmm.
But undocumented, which is that Choctaw side, there's a 10 or 15% there.
Is there even documentation for the Choctaw side for anybody?
I think there might be, but I'm not too sure because they have to go through that CDIB enrollment to actually get that. But it depends on if you have the birth certificates and death certificates of the one who's a member of, whether they were enrolled members or not.
Yeah.
So,
I just didn't know, like there are some tribes out there that there's really no enrollment. There's just...
Yeah, there's undocumented, and there's some people that are only like recognized by the state, but not by federal. CDIB is the BIA, so that's federal level.
Yeah.
So like the like some Cherokee bands are I can't remember if they're states, but majority of them are federal. But then like there's some people that are like Gina band Choctaw, Moa band Choctaw. I'm not sure if they're state or they're federal, but they are state though.
Yeah.
State recognized.
Crazy. So is there kind of a friendly rivalry between the Mississippi and the Oklahoma Choctaw when y'all play? I mean, obviously, if you're playing against each other, of course there's going to be a rivalry, but is there, because of the Oklahoma being, versus the Mississippi background there?
That's a good question. And like, I came into the game during that time in the World Series at a different time. Some still have kind of that old mentality of like, you're not real Choctaw or real Choctaws are here in Mississippi. Then, some of our Choctaws here changed drastically for business. And like we were the original ones that left officially. And some of those that were stayed, there were the ones that stayed there. It was like, well, it's just a big mess. And so,
yeah.
But today, when I see a lot of people today playing, especially us older ones, we kind of are able to be more friendly. We actually talk to each other more. Yeah. Other than the field, there's no hostility outside of that.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of supposed to be left on the field in true traditional fashion.
True.
So it just, we always known that we were relatives to each other, and we always pay homage to whenever we're there and whenever they're here. But there's that little rivalry that does play competitively. And then some people actually will see it a little bit more than competitively, but it just depends on the individual.
Yeah.
And so it's always within good faith and good fun. It just happened to be, though, that every time we play and get over there, they just have more experience and more playing time. And then some of our people here, even though some of our people here play in different sports, they just don't grasp the concept. And also, distance is probably a factor that has kind of been a part that kind of plays in our playing, that we're not able to see each other as closely as often.
Yeah.
And in some communities over there, actually travel an hour and a half too. So it's up to the people that actually want to make that drive, have the drive to drive from place to place. And so, and then what that entails is like money, like, do I have the money to go to this practice or whatever?
Yeah, sure.
But it just depends on who wants it more, So that's where that competitive streak comes from. And,
love it.
That's where we see a lot more competitive on the field. And it's not just about Oklahoma versus Choctaw. It's about who's going to be the better one of the whole tournament. Definitely when the World Series happens. And then whenever we start having more tournaments here in Oklahoma, we always have an invite to anyone that wants to come play, like who has an organization or who has a representation. So like the Chickasaws, the Livingston, the Alabama Cashadas have come up here to Oklahoma from Texas. We've had some of the Kadugi, which is from Talco area, which is the Cherokees that adopted our style and play our style, Choctaw Stickball. And then even allowing some of the people or the reservation teams from Mississippi come all the way to Oklahoma. And so it shows a big part of where their communities are allowing, but also supporting the transition of their people to come over here and represent in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And that's just phenomenal to see. Whether it's on their own dollar or whatever, whether it's the community or their own dollar, there's a pride and there's a love, there's compassion for it just to play ball. Because in Mississippi, they don't play once a year. But for us here, we play, exhibitions and stuff like that more frequently, but it's not like an all or nothing like the World Series.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like for play or exhibition, but still, when we have these small tournaments, everyone brings it, and I love that now where you start to see more of that. Especially within, after this COVID happening, people have lost players. People have lost members who were the players before them that taught them. And so it definitely plays, everyone starts to get out there and actually give it their all because they don't know when's the next time they're going to play.
Whoa, that's heavy.
It is. And actually this weekend, Saturday, we're actually having a unity walk. There's a unity walk that one of our community members here in Durant, he actually wanted to host it. And I said, well, I can, speaking from work, I said, we can provide a field for you.
Nice.
From my director, she allows it, and she did. And so I was like, well, we can't do much for you else other than that. It's like, that's all. We just wanted to do this commemorative type of walk, this drum, like we talked about, like walking in.
Yeah.
Having players come in and walk in and just kind of say, you know, some words of encouragement, but also honor and respect to those that had passed. And then the kind of reason why we still play today and why we'll continue to play. And then just have a little celebration of life, but also then have a little game just so that we can say this is for you, you know, those who have passed.
Gives me goosebumps. That's really cool.
And it's good, yeah, it's definitely good, but it came from a member, and so we're supportive to it, and we didn't want it to be a huge thing because we closed down Labor Day, or Labor Day was shut down.
Choctaw.
And so even this interaction is, if it's on a small scale, that we can keep it within reason to actually have, you know, people not so close but distant, but also have a short segment of time, so we're not trying to continue the spread. But it's still a good gesture, and I was on board with it, and my director was on board with it. And so definitely wanted to kind of help this and actually be one of many to come in the future, whether we get opened and are, you know, with this a lot of time, you know, to actually do something. Oh, so like the passion of how people are playing today, you know, like they bring it, you know, it's just like, it's awesome that you get people from Mississippi, you get people from Texas, people from northern area and from Mississippi, again, different communities. You know, everyone just comes back, even some of them that are older than I am, and some people that were my mentors and my players that I watched growing up. Some will actually be there, either they play or either they just watch. It just makes everyone kind of just jive again to where they're like, man, look how far we've come, you know, this time and age. And how frequent it is and how supportive we are now to actually do this more openly, and then like makes you think what else we're going to do next is where the game goes.
Love it.
And so, like I was saying, people bring it though. So until we put restrictions on, like whether the host says no tackling or whatever, we could say that and then enforce it with refs. But sometimes if we just allow it, then we allow it. But we know that we allow it without no fighting. And sometimes when fighting happens, it happens, and so we kind of have to regulate that. But other than that, it's just a very passionate and moving thing to actually see people come out, or the players come out and play again.
That's awesome and so inspiring. Again, just to see all these Native Americans coming together. Period.
Yeah.
Sometimes when there's also a mixture of, you know, you've got playing the Cherokee, sometimes playing the Mississippi Choctaw, whatever it is. So I'm sure that people are going to start looking at your name online, trying to figure out, you know, what the sticks look like that you make and things like that. And you've got an Instagram page that people can go to, right?
Yes. My Instagram page for my sticks is called Billy Ickby. It's BILLYIKBI on Instagram. And it's just a little window of like some things that I've done within the last 2 years or year and a half. And there's a lot more that's going on there. But definitely that Billy Ickby is kind of like my stamp or my craftsmanship when it pertains to sticks, but also like recreations of weapons and other things that I've done for my Choctaw culture.
Oh, wow.
I just haven't promoted it on there yet, but that's just kind of something that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I'm still up in the air if I want to do it full time or if I want to do it when I retire or whatever.
We'll see what's coming in the future.
But
That's exciting.
There's definitely a process that you can see from raw tree to felling to some of the bending and just little teasers here and there. Actually, I don't give you everything, but I give you some of the beginning and outcomes. So it's like, how does he do that?
Magic.
But yeah, only for now at the moment, I'm only on Instagram. And that's kind of where I am starting to kind of drop a little bit of hints and pictures here and there. So
so listeners, please go check out Billy Ickby. Follow this journey he's on, and I know that there's a ton of YouTube videos out there of him helping others too to know how to make the sticks and all that stuff. Such a craft. So something that isn't so impressive is the strength and power and precision that these natives must have had to be able to hit that little ball to that skinny pole with a large amount of people coming after them at the same time. I mean, think about how they may have had a similar scenario in battle and to have killed buffalo or deer or whatever they were hunting and have been successful at it. So surely in the old days, that focus on their targets must have helped them to make you guys the best athletes that you are in the world. in my opinion. I mean, I've seen it. It's pretty impressive. So thank you so much for being here with me, Brenner. This was really informative. I know folks are going to love hearing about this. So, Yakoki.
Yakoki, thank you for having me.
The Choctaw Nation has always provided a foundation upon which a future can be built. From our home in southeast Oklahoma to a bingo hall that grew to be one of the largest casinos in the world. Today's summer school programs lay the groundwork for a love of learning. Small business programs support local economies. And with over 10,000 jobs created, Choctaw offers financial stability to tribal members and our neighbors. Together we build success, because together we're more.
Thanks for listening to Native Chalk Talk. Be sure to join our community on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Simply search for Native Chalk Talk. That's Native, CHOCTALK. And check us out at nativechalktalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Yakoki. Thank you, my friends.